you say if a cop asked a question, you went silent, and that silence got used against you later? That can happen faster than you think. But 5 simple words can protect your silence before your whole night goes bad. Subscribe right now or you'll forget this when you actually need it during a real traffic stop. Hit like too, because what I'm about to show you could keep your own words and even your silence from being twisted against you. Here's what you're about to learn, and you need this in your memory before your next stop, not during it. You're going to learn the 5-word line that makes your silence clear. You're going to learn the follow-up line that shuts down search requests. You're going to learn the question that tells you whether you're stuck there or free to go. And you're going to learn the lawyer line that protects you when the stop turns serious. Let me show you exactly how this works in plain English, because most people have no idea that just going quiet is not always enough by itself. I've analyzed over 200 body cam videos, and you see the same mistake again and again. Drivers think silence alone protects them. Then the officer keeps talking, the driver gets nervous, blurts something out, and the whole stop gets worse. You need a simple script, not confidence, because your confidence disappears the second those lights hit your mirror. Now let's talk about why this matters so much for you. When an officer asks a question, your brain wants to fill the silence. You want to look normal, you want to sound cooperative, you want the stop over fast, so you guess, you explain, you joke, you say things like, "I only had 1 drink," or "There's nothing in here that's mine," or "Why are you asking me that?" That is exactly how you lose control of your own situation. Listen closely, because this is critical. Your goal is not to win a roadside conversation. Your goal is to protect your rights without making the stop harder on yourself. That means you stay calm, you keep your hands visible, you give basic required documents if you're driving, and you stop donating information. Here's the reality. Officers are trained to keep you talking. You need to be trained to stop helping. If your state requires you to disclose a licensed firearm or identify yourself, you follow that law. But outside of what the law clearly requires, you do not volunteer your way into trouble. The first thing you do is make your silence official out loud. Here's exactly what you say. "I invoke the 5th Amendment." Word for word. Memorize that line. Those are the 5 words in this title, and they matter because they make your silence clear instead of vague. In plain English, you are saying, "I am using my right not to answer questions that could hurt me." You are not being rude. You are not picking a fight. You are not confessing anything. You are drawing a clear line with your own mouth before anyone else defines your silence for you. This comes straight from Supreme Court rulings. In Salinas versus Texas, the court said that in a voluntary interview, silence by itself did not automatically protect the person because he never clearly invoked the 5th Amendment. That means if you just stare, shrug, or look away, your silence may not do for you what you think it does. That's why your 5-word line matters so much. Defense attorneys use this exact line in court because it is short, direct, and hard to misunderstand. Bad way. Most drivers say, "I don't know what you mean," or they just freeze up and say nothing. Then the officer keeps pushing, and that awkward silence can get framed as suspicious later. Good way. Smart drivers say, "I invoke the 5th Amendment." Then your silence has a clear reason attached to it. Watch what happens when you do this right. The whole tone changes. The officer may not like it. The officer may repeat the question. The officer may try a softer version of the same question. But now you are no longer drifting. You are standing on a clear legal choice. If the officer asks, "Why won't you answer?" you do not start explaining. You do not say, "Because I have something to hide." You do not get clever. You can simply repeat the line or stay quiet after you already used it. That is the power here. You are not trying to sound smart. You are trying to sound clear. And clarity protects you better than conversation ever will. If you remember one sentence from this whole video, make it this one, because it changes your silence from empty space into a real legal shield. Have you ever been in a moment where you felt your mouth moving before your brain caught up? Drop a comment below, because once you understand this first line, you'll never look at police questions the same way again. The second thing you do is stop any search from becoming your own idea. If an officer asks to look in your car, your bag, or your stuff, here's exactly what you say. "I do not consent to searches." Word for word. Keep it calm. Keep it flat. Keep it short. Here's the trick they don't want you knowing. If you say yes, you may have just made the search much easier for them to defend later. In Schneckloth versus Bustamonte, the Supreme Court said consent can make a search lawful even without a warrant. In plain English, if you give permission, you help open the door yourself. And police do not have to remind you that you can say no. That's why your refusal matters so much for your own protection. Bad way, most drivers say, "Sure, I've got nothing to hide." Then the officer searches, and you've already made one of your biggest rights weaker with one sentence. Good way. Smart drivers say, I do not consent to searches. Then the officer has to rely on some other legal reason, not your permission. This is 100% legal. You are allowed to refuse consent. Now, that does not mean the officer will always stop. If the officer searches anyway, you do not resist with your body, you do not grab anything, you do not block the door, you do not argue with your hands, you stay calm, and if needed, you repeat your line. I do not consent to searches. That keeps your position clear for later. Here's the reality. A lot of drivers think saying no makes them look guilty, but saying yes can be much worse for you. If the officer already has a legal reason, your yes was not needed. If the officer did not have a legal reason, your yes might be what saves the search for them. That is why your refusal matters. Former police officers have confirmed this works because it changes the stop from easy permission to a documented objection. And when officers ask in that casual voice, "You don't mind if I take a quick look, right?" Remember what that really means. They are asking you to waive a protection you can never unwaive in that moment. So don't make speeches. Don't say, I know my rights in a loud tone. Don't start citing the Constitution like you're in a courtroom. Just use your short line and stop. The shorter you are, the safer you are. The third thing you do is find out whether the stop is still about the stop or whether you are now sitting in an open-ended investigation. You look at the officer and say this, am I being detained or am I free to leave? Those exact words. You need that question because traffic stops are not supposed to turn into endless roadside interviews just because you seem nervous. In Rodriguez versus United States, the Supreme Court said police cannot stretch a completed traffic stop longer just to chase unrelated evidence without proper reason. In plain English, once the job of the stop is done, like checking your license or writing your ticket, the officer does not get unlimited extra time with you just because they feel curious. Bad way. Most drivers say, I guess I'll wait, or take your time. Then the stop drags on, more questions come, and your risk keeps growing. Good way. Smart drivers say, am I being detained or am I free to leave? Then the officer has to make your status clear. That clarity matters for you because it tells you what kind of encounter you are really in. If the officer says you are free to go, you go calmly. You do not hang around to explain yourself. You do not ask, so we're good? You leave. If the officer says you are detained, then you know the stop is no longer just friendly conversation and you keep your guard up. Legal experts agree this is your strongest protection when a stop starts drifting into fishing mode. Let me show you exactly why this question matters. Without it, you can sit there feeling trapped while the officer keeps building pressure with one small question after another. With it, you force the moment into focus. Either you can leave or the officer has to own the detention out loud. Watch what happens when drivers never ask. The warning or ticket is done, but they keep sitting there because the officer says, mind hanging tight for a minute? Then 1 minute becomes 10. Then maybe a second officer arrives. Then the whole encounter gets bigger. With your question, you interrupt that blur. One important thing for you here. If the officer orders you out of the car, you comply. Police can order drivers out during a stop. Your words protect you. Your body stays compliant. If you've made it this far, you're already ahead of most drivers. Show me by hitting that like button, because the next move is what protects you when the whole stop turns serious. The fourth thing you do is ask for a lawyer the second this becomes real criminal questioning. If you are arrested or clearly in custody and they keep questioning you, here's exactly what you say. I want a lawyer now. Word for word. You can also add, I will not answer questions without a lawyer. But if your brain is racing, lock in the short version first. I want a lawyer now. That line matters because it stops you from thinking you can talk your way out once the pressure gets heavy. In Miranda versus Arizona, the Supreme Court said that when police question a person in custody, the person must be warned about the right to remain silent and the right to a lawyer. In plain English, if you are under arrest or in a situation where you are not free to leave and they want answers, your safest move is to stop talking and ask for counsel. Bad way. Most drivers say, maybe I should talk to a lawyer, or do you think I need one? Then the questions keep rolling and your uncertainty gets used against you. Good way. Smart drivers say, I want a lawyer now. Then your line is clear and the risk of you talking yourself deeper goes way down. This is 100% legal. You are not being difficult. You are using a right that exists for moments exactly like this. And once you say it, stick to it. Do not get sucked back in because the officer suddenly sounds friendly. Do not start explaining because you think one more sentence will clear it up. It almost never does. I've analyzed over 200 body cam videos, and one of the biggest patterns you see is this. People do the hard part, they ask for a lawyer, and then they ruin it by talking again. Don't do that to yourself. If you ask for a lawyer, mean it. If you invoke your rights, stay with your choice. Now let's put the law together in simple English so you really understand what you are doing with these lines. Salinas versus Texas tells you that silence alone may not protect you if you never clearly say you are invoking the Fifth Amendment. That is why your 5-word line matters. Schneckloth versus Bustamonte tells you that if you consent to a search, that consent can make the search legal even without a warrant. That is why you never casually say yes just to seem cooperative. Rodriguez versus United States tells you police cannot keep stretching a traffic stop longer than needed, just to investigate other things without proper reason. That is why your question about detention matters. And Miranda versus Arizona tells you that when you are in custody and police want to question you, your rights to silence and counsel are supposed to be protected. In plain English, every one of these cases rewards the same kind of behavior from you. Clear words, calm tone, no extra chatter, no guessing, no roadside speeches. That is why short lines beat long explanations every single time. Now picture your own real stop so you can hear how this sounds. You are driving home at night. Lights flash behind you. You pull over safely. Your hands stay visible. You give your license, registration, and insurance when asked. Then the officer starts testing your mouth. Where are you coming from? Have you had anything to drink? Why are you so nervous? Wrong way, you say, just dinner. Then, only one drink. Then, I'm not nervous, I'm just tired. Now you are answering, correcting, and digging. Then the officer asks, mind if I check the car real quick? And you say, I guess that's fine. That is how an ordinary stop turns into a long night. Right way, same stop. The officer asks a guilt question and you say, I invoke the Fifth Amendment. If the officer asks again, you do not start filling the silence. If the officer asks to search, you say, I do not consent to searches. If the ticket or warning is done and the officer keeps you there, you ask, am I being detained or am I free to leave? If the whole thing escalates and you are put in custody, you say, I want a lawyer now. See the pattern for you? Every line is short. Every line is repeatable. Every line keeps you from becoming the star witness against yourself. That is why these tactics work together so well. You are not trying to out-argue police. You are refusing to help build a case with your own mouth. In 3 days, I'm dropping the next video on what to say when police ask to search your phone. Subscribe right now or you'll miss the tactic that protects the most private part of your whole life. So here's your recap, and you should burn these lines into your memory now before stress takes over later. First, if you want your silence to count, say, I invoke the Fifth Amendment. Second, if they ask to search, say, I do not consent to searches. Third, if the stop seems done but they keep pressing, ask, am I being detained or am I free to leave? Fourth, if you are in custody and questioning continues, say, I want a lawyer now. You stay calm, you comply with lawful physical orders, you do not lie, you do not volunteer, you do not turn pressure into a conversation. Short lines protect your future better than long explanations ever will. Hit subscribe so you catch that phone search video the second it drops. Smash that like button if this just gave you a script your future self may really need, and drop a comment telling me which line you're going to memorize first. Stay safe out there.